Welcome, everyone. I'm Kathy Giacomini. I am the co-principal investigator of the UCSF-Stanford CERSI, and I am joined in welcoming you today with Kuldev Singh, who is on the executive committee of our UCSF-Stanford CERSI, and we are happy to welcome you to our 5th annual CERSI Innovations in Regulatory Science Summit. This summit has really become a centerpiece of the UCSF-Stanford CERSI and indeed of all the different CERSIs. So what is a CERSI? A CERSI is a center of excellence in regulatory science and innovation. It is funded and supported by the FDA to conduct collaborative research, collaborations between FDA scientists and academic scientists in all the different CERSIs. And as you're aware, FDA is more than approval of small molecule drugs, which people traditionally think about it. FDA regulates a wide variety of medical products, and you can see ranging from therapeutic antibodies, cell-based therapies, digital health, devices, a whole plethora of diagnostics. And to conduct that, to do that kind of regulation, approval, monitoring, ensuring the public safety, FDA needs research, and we've got a rapidly changing landscape of medical products. And that research we broadly term, although it covers a variety of different fields, we broadly term regulatory science, and we define it as research that simply helps regulators make better decisions. And so to help them in their research mission, FDA sponsors a lot of different varieties of collaborative research. And one of those is they fund a network and sponsor a network of academic centers of excellence in regulatory science and innovation. And I'm showing you here on the map the CERSIs that are funded by the FDA. So we're over here on the West Coast, the UCSF-Stanford CERSI, but we also have Yale Mayo Clinic, Hopkins on the East Coast, as well as University of Maryland, and introducing this year the new CERSI that's been funded called Research Triangle CERSI, or Triangle CERSI, which is a collaboration between the University of North Carolina and Duke University. And all of us are interacting collaboratively with FDA scientists in a variety of research projects. And each of the PIs of the different CERSIs are here. I think I've seen them all here this morning, and they will be presenting posters. They and their teams will be presenting posters at the poster session, so that's also a fun event. One of the other things that's going on this year is we are celebrating, and the reason we're celebrating is we've all recently been renewed for 5 years, so we will have 5 more years of summits for sure. Yes, thank you. And we're very happy we've been renewed, and we're also very happy to welcome UNC and Duke into their first 5 years of funding. So it's a celebration. We're all very happy today. So in addition to what we normally have and what I think has made this summit very fun is we have a lot of panel discussions, but this year we decided let's add some debates. We often get controversial topics going on in those panels, so let's make them debates, and we'll have a pro and a con. So we're going to have some exciting debates, and Kuldev is going to describe that, and of course we have our normal poster session. I want to end my welcoming piece before I turn it over to Kuldev by just letting you know that we have a huge number of faculty at both UCSF and Stanford that work tirelessly on our CERSI, and they have helped us, as well as people from the outside who participate, like Ann Wojcicki and Andy Plump, et cetera, Mark McClellan, that have participated in organizing the CERSI summit. I want to call out 3 people in particular. The first 2 are faculty members who really do the heavy lifting. I literally mean it. We start meeting starting in February to plan the exciting program for today, and that is Laura Esserman, who you will see soon, sitting up there on the front row, and Kuldev Singh. These people are very responsible for the content today. So let's give them all a round of applause. And then I think I'm going to ask him to come forward because this guy is a master herder of cats, Nathan Dang. Nathan, come forward. He is unbelievable. And he has done an amazing job this year. So thank you so much, Nathan. I know we'll all see him around today for sure. And I'm turning it over to Kuldev. Thank you, Kuldev.
Thank you, Kathy. And I have to say that, there are people you work with, you have fun with, but you get nothing done. There are other people you work with, you get a lot done, but it's no fun. When it comes to fun, productivity combo, if there's an index, there's no one better to work with than Kathy. So, this is as Kathy mentioned, it's our 5th annual CERSI Summit, a bold vision for the future of regulatory science. The idea for this summit goes back about a decade when Rob Califf was in his first term as FDA Commissioner, and Rob was tremendously supportive at the outset, and actually everybody at FDA has been supportive, and without their support, this meeting would not be possible. And really the main goal of this summit is to highlight the power of CERSI and regulatory science with regard to the innovation of medical products to improve healthcare. But another very important goal is to bring people together, to promote dialogue between all stakeholders, and I think today, I hope that you'll take advantage of the networking opportunities and some collaborative opportunities will come forth. Our first summit was in 2020, and we exceeded all expectations, both with regard to content and also attendance, and got great feedback, so we decided to do another one in 2021, but unfortunately for 2 years we had to do these virtually until 2023 when we were able to reconvene in person in this room. And last year was our biggest summit with over 2,500 individuals participating either in person or virtually. And this year's summit, as Kathy mentioned, includes some new concepts. We're going to have debates in addition to the panel discussions. We're going to start off with Kathy giving us an update on summit panels from last year. Rob is going to give us the FDA year in review again, and then we'll end with a poster and networking session. The first panel will be on medical misinformation and why it's killing us, and this will be co-moderated by Rob and Laura Esserman. Panel 2 is on variation in regulatory approaches across the globe, bringing products available, making them available worldwide. And Laura will co-chair this session with Tina Morrison, who's director of the Office of Regulatory Science and Innovation. It's great to have Tina in person this year. Panel 3 is on accelerating CMC commercialization, and Anya Hanley and Peter Marks. And Peter, I also want to thank Peter for being in person or being at all of the sessions as well. Peter has made the trip to be here. Our fourth panel is new this year. It's a FDA-centered directors forum where Namanje Bumpus, who's the FDA chief scientist and soon to be principal deputy commissioner, will join me in co-moderating a session where we'll hear from Patricia Cavazzoni, Peter Marks, and Jeff Shuren, representing CDER, CBER, and CDRH, respectively. And then back again for the 3rd consecutive year is the FDA Chiefs Chat, which will be co-moderated by Janet Woodcock and Andy Plump. And you see the panelists, 4 past commissioners and actually a current commissioner. And then the 2 debates. Kathy mentioned we're going to have debates this year, the 2 topics that were chosen from a long list. And please send us ideas. We like feedback. And we also like ideas for next year. But the 2 we chose this year, we're limited by time, is direct-to-consumer advertising good for patients? And Thomas Phillipson and Rita Redberg will take the yes and no positions here. And then should advisory committees always vote? This has been in the news quite a bit lately. And here Aaron Kesselheim and Jenny Cantor will take the yes and no positions respectively. We'll end with closing remarks and a poster session. Janet, Kathy, and Tina will lead this. And then we'll go to the reception downstairs. We hope you'll stay for that. And I want to again thank our organizing committee, Laura and Kathy, Mark McClellan, Andy Plump, Lawrence Lynn, and especially Nathan for all his hard work. A shout out to him again. I also want to thank Stanford Video, and special thanks to all the people who helped organize this meeting, and not to forget our sponsors, our platinum sponsor, Merck, our gold sponsors, Gilead and Takeda, and our silver sponsors, Genentech, Intuitive, and Lilly. Please mark your dates for next year's meeting, which will be January 5th, 2025, right here at UCSF. And I'm going to turn it back over to Kathy.
Oh, thank you, Kuldev. Thank you. I'm going to move it over. Okay, so I'm going to introduce, I don't know, I shouldn't even need notes, Sam, to introduce you, because it seems like Sam has been a regular at our CERSIs and has been a supporter. So Sam Hawgood is the Chancellor of UCSF. He got his medical training at the University of Queensland in Brisbane. He trained as a resident in pediatrics, and he has served in almost every capacity here at UCSF in his 39 years, and he is now our 10th UCSF Chancellor. His professional affiliations and honors are many. The reason we have him give opening remarks is not only his strong belief in translational research, but because he's a very strong supporter of CERSI and collaborations with FDA scientists and academic scientists. So, Sam, please come up.
Thank you, Kathy, and welcome everyone to UCSF and our Mission Bay campus. Calling what I'm about to say opening remarks is a little grandiose. I've got the easiest job of the day, and that is simply to welcome you all here. Thank you for your interest in regulatory science. And my second job is to thank Kathy and Kuldev and Russ for their incredible leadership in the first iteration of CERSI, and congratulations on being refunded for 5 more years. I've been making welcoming remarks for the last 5 years, and I've learned very quickly that following Kathy and Russ, there's nothing very much for me to say because I've already outlined what CERSI is, what the agenda is for the day. I would like to just make one point, and that is when Kathy showed you the map of where the CERSIs are geographically located. There's a big distance between those on the East Coast and the West Coast. And I think the importance of the UCSF-Stanford CERSI in particular is its geographic location. And that's even more important now, I think, with the amazing release of the technologies over the last 12 to 24 months that I think are going to fairly radically change different ways that clinical medicine is undertaken, as well as research and development of new drugs, new synthetic biology tools, new devices, et cetera. And obviously I'm talking about AI in its many forms. And that, while it's a worldwide explosion, there's a particular concentration here in the Bay Area. And I think giving the CERSI here gives the FDA eyes and ears on the ground as these things are so rapidly evolving. And so I think it's a particularly exciting time. I thank Rob for his support of this, and I hope you all have a wonderful day today. I know from looking at the agenda it's going to be very exciting, so thank you.
Okay, yeah, so I'm going to give, as Kuldev was saying in his opening remarks, one of the things we discussed after we always have a download in February about, what went on at the summit and how we can improve and what topics were really brought up and what topics we should bring forward to the next year. And one thing we noted was we'd start and we'd say, these will be exciting topics, but we never followed up on what happened to the very interesting topics we had the year before. And so we decided to do a report on what happened to some of those topics. So I have been charged with doing that, and I, of course, communicated with the different panel leaders. So last year's summit, we had 4 different panels. First, of course, Rob gave his FDA year in review, which is absolutely fantastic, and we'll have that again this year. And so I'm not going to review what he reviewed. But anyway, so panel 1, we talked about diversity in clinical trials. So a lot of progress has been made there, and I'll highlight some of that since that panel. Panel 2, we talked about cross-agency synergies between FDA particularly and CMS. How do those two work together to approve medical products and price them accordingly? We also talked about global regulatory drug development. Some progress has been made there, and I'll talk about that. And the focus there was on access of medicines to everybody. And finally, we had our wonderful FDA chief chats. I won't give you an update on that. Okay, so who came last year? So we have a virtual audience, and they were largely from the United States, but we also had people coming from Africa, from Europe, from Asia, etc. You people in the audience, the in-person attendees, are largely from pharma and biotech. You're about half of the people in the audience, and then the other half is academics. A lot of academics are here, but we also have people from, of course, from FDA and government here who are here as well. All right, so let's look at panel 1 and what they talked about and and what's happened since that panel. So it was chaired by Laura Esserman and Patrizia Cavazzoni, who's the director of CEDAR. And the focus was on disparities in clinical trial enrollment and how the clinical trials do not reflect the population of the country, either geographically or ethnically. So there were a lot of issues discussed. We also had our president of the University of California, Michael Drake, who's been a strong supporter of our CERSI, and Congresswoman Anna Eshoo. So she was able to talk about legislative issues. So it was a really robust discussion. And since then, a couple of things have happened. One major thing happened, which was Anna had been talking, or Congresswoman Eshoo had been talking about the legislative needs for disparities, for getting rid of disparities in clinical trials. So the 2023 Consolidated Appropriations Act was enacted into law. And in that act, they have now instructed FDA to require diversity plans for all phase 3 clinical trials, and this means for drugs, devices, and biologics and diagnostics. So those are now required. And they also requiring subgroup analysis or reporting of those clinical trials. So you don't just get to have a diverse clinical trial, but you should do some analysis on the different subgroups, whether they're ethnic or geographic. FDA continues to be highly supportive and making resources available to promote clinical trial diversity. I went to their website and noted that they now have, a guidance for promoting clinical trial diversity in 10 different languages, so that continues. So we're making progress. I don't think we're finished with this task, but we're making progress in this area. In cross-agency synergies between FDA and CMS, Kuldev, Singh, and Mark McClellan chaired that or moderated that panel. We also had on the panel someone from the FDA, clearly, Jeff Sheeran, who is the director of the CDRH, and we also had Lee Fleischer. He's the chief medical officer at CMS, so we could really talk about how those two agencies interact to approve and then accordingly price medical products. And that panel had been really put together surrounding some of the pricing issues that had come out, I think aducanumab and some of those issues that had come out the previous year. So what has happened since then is in August, CMS nominated, I believe, 10 drugs for price negotiation. They worked with FDA to exclude orphan drugs. So orphan drugs for a single indication are excluded. And what that does is they work together, but that I think maintains an incentive for medical product developers to continue to develop orphan drugs. So I think that was a good thing. And then they continue to have parallel review between FDA and CMS, which helps to shorten time to market for medical products. So things have happened also in those cross-agency interactions. Of course, we'd all like to see more happen over time. What about building a global regulatory vision? And here our focus was, how can we get medical products to, especially underdeveloped countries? It was chaired by myself and Dan Hartman, who's at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We had Emmer Cook, who is the executive director of the European Medicines Agency, participating, as well as Moji Adaihe, who is the director of the Nigerian FDA. So we had a really nice cross-global section there and a very nice interaction, and then we had other really good panelists. And so what has happened then is one of the things that's very important to all of us is to getting drugs into and drugs and all sorts of medical products to poor and low and middle income countries is that their regulatory bodies have to achieve a certain status. They have to be able to review these products. They have to be able to approve these products. So the Nigerian FDA achieved WHO maturity level 3, and they are now working on maturity level 4, which means that they can do more and more and review more and more products. In May, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation awarded another about $20 million to improve access to medicines. They're particularly focused on lowering costs for lower and middle income countries so they can get those medicines. And they finally, one of the big issues last year were vaccines and access of vaccines, availability of vaccines in low and middle income countries. And so they've invested in research in vaccine technology and mRNA vaccines as well. So I think we've made some progress. There's a lot of progress to go in each one of these areas. I'm putting up the save the date here, again, for next year's CERSI, which will be Sunday, January 5th, again, right in front of the J.P. Morgan conference. And I'm turning it over to Kuldev, who will introduce someone who probably needs no introduction, Rob Califf.
Thanks, Kathy. What a great summary. And, it's good to know that we're having some impact. And I think we should do this every year and really summarize what's happened over the year following our panels. I also want to thank Sam for his opening remarks and also acknowledge Lloyd Minor, the Dean of Stanford University School of Medicine, who's kind of modestly sitting in the back there. But this is very much a joint UCSF-Stanford effort. And in fact, this started as a one-day meeting, but tomorrow on the Stanford campus, we're going to do a deep dive on some of the scientific projects that are going on. And so those of you who can make the trip down to Palo Alto, the weather's always better there, I want you to know. Please get in the car or Uber or whatever, go down and take a look at some of the tremendous science being done. So now it's my great privilege to introduce Robert Califf, FDA Commissioner. Rob, as I mentioned earlier, has been incredibly supportive of the CERSI from the very beginning. And, I talked about this last year, but we had breakfast with Rob about 10 years ago, and he said, yes, let's do this. And, he's been at every single summit, and even the one in 2022 when he was in the final days of confirmation, and we said he was in the witness protection program. We couldn't say anything or do anything, but he somehow was still joined us for the summit. I met Rob about a decade ago, soon after he was recruited by a bipartisan group of Congress people who went down to Durham and took him away from his cushy job as vice chancellor at Duke after a tremendous career as a very prolific and distinguished clinician scientist. And Rob moved to Washington to take over leadership of the FDA. And that was, of course, in an era where the term bipartisan was a part of the English language. Since that time, no one agrees on anything. But I think we can all agree that Rob's been a tremendous commissioner. And as we begin any year with ideas and hopes and aspirations for a year, we reflect back, but we also look forward. And one of my wishes for 2024 and beyond is that Rob stays healthy, wants to keep doing this job, because he is in many ways the conscience of healthcare in the United States at a very, very important time. And so it's great to have Rob here in person. Rob, thank you for everything you do for our profession, and thank you for being here again this year.
Thanks, Kuldev, and it's great to be back in the Bay Area, sort of our second home the way I look at it, and I've had some great times here. It's good to see a lot of old friends. I think all of you know I don't really enjoy looking back. I like to look forward, so I'm not going to reflect a lot on what happened last year, but I think it'll come out. What I want to talk about is our priorities and issues for this year that we're facing. First of all, sort of straddling last year and this year is changes in leadership at the FDA. Probably all of you are fully aware that Janet Woodcock is finally retiring. A lot of us thought it would actually never happen because over the years she's always refreshed herself with new things to do, and this has certainly been the case over the last year. We also had a turnover in the leadership of the food side of FDA. I'll say more about that in a minute, which for most of you is not something you probably think about every day, but is an enormous part of the work of the FDA. As you know, F does stand for food. A lot of people reminded me of that over the last year. But we have a great group of leaders, and I just the way I am, I have to say it this way. As I look across the different segments of the FDA, which for a lot of reasons tend to get siloed into their particular area, not just because of the way people at FDA or leaders at FDA are, but because there's an entire constituency of people who tend to put pressure on the FDA to keep it that way. I think our leaders are almost the ideal leaders for each of their individual areas. The work that needs to be done in the leadership at FDA is how to work across the FDA to have more of a coherent, cohesive FDA, maintaining the differences that have to be there because the laws that govern the different part of the FDA have significant differences that have to be accounted for, and the constituencies are important. But particularly in this era, when, for example, information technology is increasingly built to be enterprise-wide, it doesn't make sense for the FDA to have 180 different IT programs going at any time, for example. I've forgotten the exact number, but it's way too many. And there's a lot of efficiency to be gained, but also reach to be gained by investing together in the best information technology. I could go on and on about this. But when we talk about the individual leaders that have come in, I think we've really been lucky. You're going to meet Dr. Bumpus today if you haven't met her already. I still love to tell this story. I'm not sure she likes for me to keep telling it, but literally, she was an endowed professor and chair of the Department of Pharmacology at Hopkins. And when we opened up the job for chief scientist at FDA, I was pretty astounded that she applied, and I tried to talk her out of it because she had it made for life, but she really wanted to come in as a civil servant at the FDA, and she's already made a big difference. And she will be stepping in to be the principal deputy to fill Dr. Woodcock's shoes. On the food side, Jim Jones, we were really lucky there too. Jim was on the review committee that laid out the work that needed to be done on the food side of the FDA. He had a long career at the EPA, so he is well tested in terms of dealing with difficult interfaces with the public, tough decisions, and how to work inside the federal government. And I believe he's going to be a great leader. So if you look across the whole drugs, devices, biologics, food, tobacco, we have Brian King, who had started, I think, at the time of last year's meeting and has really proven himself. More to say about that. I see Peter Marks here. When I meet with the executive team, it's a tremendous team. The place we got to work is where are the synergies, where are the differences, how do we deal with that in the best possible way. So related to leadership is a reorganization. We're currently in the midst of the largest reorganization in the history of the FDA. It started with the review of the food program, which really did need to be updated. This is one case where, when I looked at the leaders of the food side, they were great. They've all turned over at this point. But it was really a case where the structure that had been put in place was a big impediment to their ability to function and make decisions the way they needed to be done. And so we're doing a major reshaping of the food program with a single leader who ultimately is accountable for decisions. Obviously, something that big, there are hundreds or thousands of decisions made at other levels. But as we did that, the majority of the food budget at the FDA is actually for the inspectorate. And so that has led to a major change that's proposed in the inspectorate. Now, I say proposed because most of the work is done in terms of thinking through the structure and what needs to be done. We still have to have agreement with the unions to represent the employees. The executive branch has to agree to it, and Congress ultimately has a chance to comment on what we're doing. But the inspectorate changes will affect all of you, and I think will move us into much more of a surveillance and inspect, using data, using information technology in such a vast world of complex technologies that are being developed, whether it's food or medical products, that will give us a much better opportunity to assure the public that we have safe and effective products. So with that, that's sort of the structural stuff. Let's talk about the priorities. I'm going to race through these. Maybe we'll have a couple of minutes for questions. Maybe not, but I'm sure these will come up over the course of the day. When I look at the overall priorities of the FDA that affect everybody, the top two for me, are misinformation and evidence generation. Misinformation, we're going to talk about that a lot today. It continues to be a huge issue. It doesn't really help if we make good decisions if people don't get the message, don't understand our decisions, or get counter information that is not grounded in science. And I'm not saying that we're perfect at FDA. We make mistakes like everybody. But I don't know of anybody who's claiming that the misinformation situation is under control at this point in terms of what's best for society. I pick evidence generation because if our decisions are not based on high-quality evidence, there's a much greater chance they're not the right decision. And this is immediately obvious when you're in my job and you look across the span of what people are worked up about and contesting. Most of the time when things are contested, the evidence is not what it really should be, but a decision has to be made. When the evidence is clear-cut, it's a lot easier to make a decision. Where are we focused here? And here's where I'm pretty excited because the big focus now is on the post-market arena. I think if you look at medical product development with Kefauver-Harris, ever since that time, there's been a structure to the development of medical products where the main purpose is to weed out things that don't work. And we just looked at a sort of cursory look at the data. It still looks like, despite all the lectures I go to about how good we are now at picking out targets, it's still about 90% of the time when things go into human trials, they end up not making it to market. And so I think the system is basically working there, but once something is on the market, there's a question, who owns that space in terms of all the evidence that needs to be generated for questions that are still left on the table? Like, how does a new treatment compare to the old treatments? How do you combine treatments? How long should you give it? In many cases, even what's the best dose? Because remember, the requirement at FDA is not that you have the right dose, it's that you have a dose that's better than nothing. And very often you get to the point where you have something that's worthwhile giving, but there are many questions about whether there might be a better dose. So here we're working closely with NIH, with its new leader, and thinking about how we might reconfigure the evidence generation system in the post-market space. I believe that it's fair to say that the FDA sort of owns the pre-market space in terms of federal agencies, but if you say who owns the post-market space, it's actually all of us, and I hope we'll have more discussion about that. Third on my list is our decline in life expectancy, which is definitely not a primary issue for FDA, but I think we've all got to be concerned about it. How can it be that we're clearly the world's innovators who are developing the best ideas and technologies for the world, and yet our life expectancy is at the bottom of the pile in terms of high-income countries? Fourth on my list is low-cost medical products. It's not something I expected to be on my list, but beginning with infant formula and going on through the drug shortages that we're seeing, we got a problem in this country which is related to the way our markets work. If you tell a bunch of smart business people who know something about medicine and healthcare, we have an array of things you can work on. Some of them make a big profit, and some of them either make no profit or lose money. Where do you think they're going to spend their time? And so we're seeing a situation where we're having constant hundreds of threatened shortages in generic drugs, and the lower the cost of the generic drug, the greater the risk of shortage. But we're also seeing an emerging, very unfortunate change happening in the device industry, where low-cost devices, things like hospital gowns and masks, have moved back to China already. There was a big effort, as you know, at the time of the pandemic to get the American businesses back into the effort, but that's all reversed, because if you leave it to the markets and you offer someone who's doing procurement a chance to save a couple of $100,000, they're going to do it without concern. And so the policies related to how to keep that industry vital. And then, of course, when we have a shortage, everybody's looking around like, how could that possibly happen in the U.S.? Well, it's happening because it's not part of the business of the way medical products are handled to make sure that there's a reliable, resilient industry there. And then I'll quickly go through what I think are the key policies for this year that are in play. Number one on my list, because it's happening right now, is tobacco. As you well know, we have proposed rules for menthol and flavored cigars. For those of you with teenagers, flavored cigars now exceed cigarettes as the primary combustible tobacco product used by teenagers. But we have final rules just about ready to go, and there's a lot of public discussion about this. I won't tell you exactly what to do, but you can read the public discussion and see what's in play now. Also in tobacco, it's well known that we're working on a rule that would reduce the level of nicotine to a sub-addictive level in any tobacco product. And so that would say if you want to use tobacco, it won't be because you're addicted to nicotine. So that's very much under play. It won't be something that could be enacted until the next administration. Then there's food. I've learned a lot about food over the last couple of years. We have several important rules that are going through. I won't dwell on them. Some of them are pretty simple, to me at least. It's like the label on a food product, it seems to me, ought to be on the front of the package, not the back of the package. But you'd be amazed at the opposition there is to putting the information at a place where people like me would actually see it when I'm shopping. We're redefining healthy. The definition of healthy is old. The question, when can you put healthy on your product? That's also hotly contested. There's an ag water rule. Probably doesn't surprise you to know in a state like California, when an outbreak occurs in produce, it's typically, in many cases, because upstream there are cattle or other animals that are contaminating the water, so we're dealing with that. And I've recently become an aficionado on ultra-processed food. I'm not telling you, we're in no position to do anything about this now. There's an enormous need for research to sort this out, but it can't be by chance that our population is growing by roughly a pound every year for the same aged person. And so this is not a policy issue so much now from my perspective as it is an issue that the federal government's got to spearhead the kind of research that'll get to the bottom of what's happening with our food supply. All right, last four areas quickly to go over. On devices, we've got laboratory developed tests. Here it's me versus academic medical centers. I feel like I'm battling my old home. But, we've made it clear that we preferred that Congress pass a law about this. Congress has not gotten its act together to do this, so we're putting forth a rule that would require that if you say your test does something, you can actually prove that it does what you say it does. Seems to me, again, that ought to be common sense, and I don't understand why academic medical centers think that's a bad thing, but maybe that'll come up later in discussion. AI is obviously a huge thing. We'll have more discussion about AI. Everybody's talking about it. I think we're in a pretty good spot relative to a field where no one knows what's going to happen. I was watching Mustafa today on Fareed Zakaria talking about his latest company back from the early days of AI now, where, at least according to him, you'll be able to dial up your AI assistant and say, I've got a meeting coming up in 3 weeks, schedule my flight, make sure that all my friends know I'm going to be there, and pick a good restaurant, and then your AI assistant will get back to you with that happening. And the implications for healthcare and food are significant. Also in devices, we got platforms. There is not an adequate regulatory scheme. You might argue there are many issues in regulation of devices that fundamentally need a relook, but one area that I know is going to be really important is the development of platforms that are integrated device structures. If you're in the OR, for the same reason many other things are done virtually, you would like to have the best surgeon available and able to scrub in virtually. To make that happen, you got to have a bunch of devices all working together at the same time. And you can say the same thing for homes. If you've ever had a parent with memory loss, I'm getting to the age now where I'm pretty concerned about it myself. You'd like that person to stay at home as long as possible. Doing that one device at a time is not going to solve the problem. And then, last three things, substances of all types. We joked last year about the need for a Center for Bad Decisions at the FDA. There are many substances that we're not going to make illegal. That's clear with Congress. We've got to have a way of regulating them which protects people from harm, like children eating gummy bears with large amounts of CBD, which has been going on. Gene modification, huge issue across the whole FDA, not just for rare diseases in people, an enormous issue for animals that has a lot at stake in terms of the environment and other aspects of the food supply, and then data and enterprise transformation. But I'll stop there. That's just sort of a short list. The amazing thing to me about the FDA is no matter how small relative to the totality of FDA an issue is, there is a constituency for which it's everything. And we're well aware of that. So when we make our list of priorities, I always worry. There are things I'm not going to mention. It doesn't mean there's not somebody at FDA who also regards that as their top priority. So please keep that in mind. Thank you.